There was one God Israel could not seem to leave alone, not the God who split the sea and walked them out of Egypt. Another one, a God of storm and rain, of harvest and seed, worshipped in every field around them. Again and again, the people turned to him, and again they were dragged back. This is the story of that God, the one Israel kept returning to, and the story of what the God of Israel demanded in return. Both gods wanted the same nation. Only one of them had made a covenant. His name was Baal. In the old languages, it simply meant Lord or Master. To the Canaanites who lived all around Israel, Baal was the storm god, the one who rode the clouds and sent the rain in its season. For people who lived on the edge of famine, that mattered more than anything else they could name. Rain meant grain. Grain meant bread. Bread meant life. So, when Israel settled among these neighbors, they did not just meet a foreign god. They met the God who seemed to hold the power over whether their children ate. We know Baal well today because of clay tablets dug up at a place called Ugarit on the Syrian coast. They tell long poems of Baal battling the raging sea and battling death itself. To the people who wrote them, he was the active God, the one you called on when the sky stayed empty and dry. Israel had been told to worship one God alone, but Baal was right there, woven into the soil and the seasons of the land they now called home. The temptation was never strange or distant. It was a daily presence. The book of Judges names the problem plainly. The Israelites did evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the God who brought them out of Egypt and followed the gods of the peoples living around them. It became a rhythm, repeated for generations. The people turned away. Trouble came against them. They cried out in distress. A deliverer rose and rescued them. Then, almost as soon as the deliverer died, they turned back to Baal again, often worse than before. The cycle did not break. With each turn, it only tightened. Why did it keep happening? Over and over. Look closely at what Baal promised. He promised rain in a land where rain was never certain from one year to the next. A farmer who planted his barley and watched the clouds had every reason to fear. Baal worship offered a way to feel in control of the harvest. The God of Israel asked for trust without that bargain. He asked the people to believe he alone gave the grain and the wine and the oil. For an anxious, hungry nation, that trust was the hardest thing of all to hold. Into this broken pattern came Gideon. God told him to tear down his own father's altar to Baal and cut down the wooden pole of the goddess standing beside it. He did it under cover of night, afraid of his own neighbors. When the town woke and demanded his death, his father gave a sharp and surprising answer. If Baal is really a god, let Baal defend himself. So they gave Gideon a new name, Jerubbaal, which means let Baal contend. It was a quiet, daring challenge. Could the great storm god even protect his own altar? Baal did not defend himself, but the people still did not learn. Judges tells us that after Gideon died, Israel turned away again and made Baal-berith their god. The pattern repeated under different names, in different towns, with the very same result. They served the Baals and the Ashtaroth, and the gods of every neighbor around them, Aram and Sidon, Moab and Ammon. The text lists them like a roll call of borrowed gods. Each time, the God of Israel was the one set aside. Each time, the cost arrived later, in chains and in loss. So what exactly did the God of Israel demand? It begins with the first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me, no carved image, no bowing down. Then comes a word that startles many readers. He calls himself jealous. The Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. This was not pettiness. It was the language of a covenant, a binding marriage between God and a people. Loyalty was the whole point. To run to Baal was not a small slip. It was breaking faith. The heart of the demand was gathered into a single line Israel was told to repeat. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love him with all your heart and soul and strength. It was not only about avoiding other altars. It was about undivided devotion, and it reached outward too, into how the people treated the widow, the orphan, and the stranger at their gate. Worship and justice were tied together. You could not honor the God of Israel while crushing the weak beside you. Centuries passed, and the contest grew sharper. A king named Ahab married a foreign princess named Jezebel and built a temple to Baal in his capital. Baal was no longer a village temptation. Now it had a throne. The land was full of prophets who spoke in Baal's name. To the writers of Kings, this was the lowest point. The God who had carried Israel out of Egypt now had to share the nation with a storm god honored by the king himself. The covenant was on the edge. Then came the day on Mount Carmel. The prophet Elijah stood alone before the prophets of Baal and the whole watching crowd of Israel. His question cut through everything. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is the true God, then follow him instead. He let the prophets of Baal call on their God from morning until evening. No fire came, no voice answered. The storm god who ruled the clouds could not send a single spark. The mountain held its breath, while one altar stayed cold and silent. Then Elijah called on the God of Israel, and fire fell. It consumed the offering, the wood, the stones, even the water poured around the altar. The crowd fell on their faces and cried out the same words again and again. The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. For one blazing moment, the wavering ended. The God of rain had been answered by the God of fire. And the people who had drifted so far returned once more to the God who had never stopped claiming them. Yet even Carmel was not the end. Elijah, worn down, believed he stood utterly alone. God answered with a quiet number. 7,000 in Israel had never bowed to Baal. The faithful were always more than the discouraged prophet could see. Later, a king named Jehu would tear down the temple of Baal and end its worship in the north for a time. But the pull never fully died. The story of Israel and Baal was less a single victory and more a long, aching tug of war over a nation's heart. The prophet Hosea found the truest words for it. He said Israel did not even know that it was the God of Israel who gave the grain, the wine, and the oil. The very gifts they credited to Baal had come from the hand they refused. Hosea called the whole affair adultery, a marriage broken again and again by a wandering heart. But he also heard God speak of winning the people back, of leading them into the wilderness and speaking tenderly to them once more, as at the beginning. Step back. And the pattern says something heavy and human. The God Israel kept returning to offered control, comfort, and a harvest they could bargain for. The God who made the covenant offered only himself and asked for everything. One promised rain. The other promised a bond. It is easy to judge an ancient farmer for choosing the storm god. It is harder to admit how often any of us reach for the thing we can manage instead of the one who asks for trust. The pull is old. It is also familiar. Thank you for sitting with this old story. If the long tug of war between Israel, Baal, and the God of the covenant gave you something to think about, take a moment to subscribe so the next forgotten figure finds its way to you. Tell me in the comments which moment landed hardest: Gideon's daring night, the silence on Carmel, or Hosea's aching call to come home. There are so many more names waiting in that ancient text. I will keep digging them up. Until the next one, go well.